but usually what we do before we start, uh, one of our members, David Levy, I'm going to say a little bit about him. I don't know if you're familiar with him, uh, but you are familiar with the comet that impacted the planet Jupiter.
Oh,
Okay,
of
it
course.
made the news.
Yes, it's a double-barreled name for the comet, right? The some
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And David is one of those two people.
Oh, wow. Which
Okay.
one? Can
And
you raise your
so
hand? Who's David?
That's
he's the one that has the sweatshirt that says Hebrew. That's all you can see. But
it's Hebrew
but
University.
I'm gonna. He usually
It's David. I
start.
thought it was you because your name
Yes.
here is listed as David. Okay. Okay.
Okay. And
Wow.
David's in my right upper corner. It says Hebrew on it.
I see it. Yes.
Okay. And David usually starts us off with a reading from literatures, poetry or literature.
Yep.
He has a doctorate in English lit with a special emphasis on William Shakespeare. Excuse me,
Wow.
Sir William Shakespeare. David, why don't you do your reading and then I'll say our opening prayer. And then I'll say a few words, introduce Robbie to everyone, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you very much, Marty. And today's quotation is one of my favorite translations of Adon Olam. And this one was written by, I mean, the prayer is fairly modern, but this translation, Solomon ben Gibaro, uh, he had to do it before the year 1058 because he died that year. And as far as I know, he's still deceased. But anyway, the thing I really like about this translation, besides as being just absolutely stunning to me, is that it follows or precedes Tennyson's rhyme scheme in In Memoriam, ABBA. And it's the same rhyme scheme, but here it goes. Lord of the world, he reigned alone, while yet the universe was not. When by his will all things were wrought, then first his sovereign name was known. And when the all shall cease to be, in dread long splendor he shall reign. He was, he is, he shall remain in glorious eternity. For he is one, no second shares his nature or his loneliness, unending and beginningless, all strength is his, all sway he bears. He is the living God to save, my rock, while sorrow's toils endure, my banner and my stronghold sure, the cup of life whene'er I crave. I place my soul within his palm, before I sleep as when I wake. And though my body I forsake, rest in the Lord in fearless calm. Thank you, and back to you, Marty.
Thank you, David.
Thank
Uh,
you.
those, okay. Anyway, I was going to, oops, excuse me one second.
David, could you read the last couple of lines again of that poem?
Yes,
The
you'll
last two lines
sound
are,
familiar to you.
Well,
and
it's
though
not that
my
it sounds
body,
familiar, it's that I would just love to hear that last part
The
about,
last couple of lines.
yeah,
and though my body I forsake, rest in the Lord in fearless calm.
that's really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you. It's by far my favorite translation of Adon Olam. And
You
it's
may
so close.
remember your grandmother or grandfather or your parents reciting when you go to bed, now I lay me down to sleep.
Yep.
Okay, and it's similar in that regard.
Yeah.
But it is very, very good. By the way, reread that little poem that people used to read before they went to sleep. It's a very interesting poem. And Robbie, if you want to speak about a Kabbalistic approach to things with the soul and what happens at night and everything else, that may be an eye opener with regard to that prayer because it's tied up in these few lines that David just read.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's an amazing, I mean, I'll wait till it's time, but there's so much to speak
Oh,
about just in introducing and what, I'm very honored to be here, to be asked by your community to do not one, but three lectures and what an honor also to be with all of you. But Mr. Levy, thank you very much. I mean, you're obviously a legend in the astronomical world. I didn't realize you were stored up here in a suburb of Tucson. So, well, how amazing!
Thank you, Robert. It's really a privilege and honor to meet you this way.
Oh,
We're
honor's all
not a
mine. Honor's all mine.
suburb of Tucson. We're our own focal point.
what?
Did you hear?
I'm sorry, Ricky, we missed that.
Oh, I said, we're not a suburb of Tucson. We're our own focal point.
I always say it's not. I always say
We're our
it's not dinner.
metropolis.
I always say it's not dinner with Robbie if I haven't put my foot in my mouth at least twice. So, so I've done it once now. I probably maybe I've done it once before. I don't know, but I'm reaching my quota. So
Good.
Now,
I'm glad to
no
help you.
offense, no offense was meant.
I know.
Robbie has come to us from across the pond, and most of you have received the email from him and received his master's in religious studies from King's College in London. And using that as a basis of his knowledge, he has lectured in quite a few places around the globe on the subject of Kabbalah, and it really is in a way very similar to the way we have been at it for so many years in taking apart. By the way, Robbie, we spent almost 2 hours last week on the love your neighbor as you would yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So and through discussion, we sometimes wind up covering many of the different aspects to a simple phrase based on different people's experiences, what they have read themselves, things like that. And then all of a sudden a light bulb suddenly flashes and somebody brings something else in. And it's a very interesting discussion. Now, we are currently in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 19. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask people to read, and Robbie, this is what I usually do: is ask people to read one of the verses or two, or sometimes an entire section, and then open it to discussion. But I want you to lead us. I would appreciate if you would lead us in the entire affair. I'm going to turn over that responsibility to you. I can just, if people have a raised hand, I will comment and bring them back into the discussion, if that's okay with you.
What I would like to suggest or offer
Sure.
is maybe what we could do is, and I just for my own ability not to be distracted by my own thoughts and other people's, I want to open up questions to any questions that we have or discussion, but maybe do it maybe every 20 minutes, half hour or so, like that, and that have people hold
Okay.
and sort of do it organically as I go through different topics. I'm very free if people want to, if you just want to do it like you do it normally every week, where I'm just another person in the conversation, I'm okay with that. But I'm more than happy. But there are certain things that I have prepared, just thoughts that I've prepared with regard to the 3 years, fruit shall not be touched, and the fourth year it's all right. That concept and how it applies to Kabbalah and the Zohar, and also it will help me because one of the things with Kabbalah, and I think it's a mistake to think of Kabbalah this way, is the notion that It's just sort of an intellectual pursuit. It's a thing. Actually, one can receive just as much moral lessons from Kabbalah, if not even more. It's just another aspect of Judaism. Just like there's the Peshat and the Remez and the Drash, there's also the Sod, which is the Kabbalah generally, usually. And I feel that it's very much an encompassing thing. So if you'll be patient with me, where we discuss a very sort of lofty intellectual concept. I'm sure you've all heard of the Sfirot, or maybe most of you have, the 10 Sfirot. Sometimes they say the 7 Sfirot, the emanations. What I want to do is give kind of a primer on that, where we become familiar with the lexicon and also create a similar basis of the lexicon. As I was describing on Thursday, when I was graciously welcomed into your shul, I have to say, the notion of sfirot. I was speaking with maybe it was with you, Marty, or maybe it was with someone else. I'm not sure, about the idea of the Tanya is what which came out of the Lubavitch movement and was the Alter Rebbe. This was a document that was geniusly crafted, but it was crafted in the year of 1796. The Alter Rebbe was the first of the 7 Lubavitcher Rebbes. And there was a prophecy very early on in the Lubavitch movement that there would only be 7 Rebbes. And in fact, in 1994, when the last Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away, and that he was the last one, there was no successor to him. And in fact, many Lubavitchers, Chabad, will refer to him as the Rebbe in present tense. And it's which is a very interesting side issue we could discuss, but it would definitely be a rabbit hole for us. I have many friends in that movement, and I've learned a lot. And I take a shiur every 2 weeks with the former head of Lubavitch UK, and he's always preaching Tanya. And I say the Tanya was great. My issue with the Tanya, though, is that the language that it uses is antiquated. It's not. I don't believe that it serves in a holistic way what the definition, for example, of many things are. The sfirot, including, they will refer to the sfirot as emotions, for example. Now, why was it so important that the language be refined? It's because we've evolved as a society. We can speak, and I know I've covered this on Thursday, but in case there wasn't anybody who wasn't there, and anyways, it bears some repeating. We can speak about these lofty concepts in a way that makes sense to us that never would have made sense. The idea that energy transfers from one person to another, that's crazy talk before the radio. But we can understand this. We have cell phones. We're talking on Zoom right now in different places, and we're all in one room. I'm a big believer that this is a minion. This is a minion here that we have. Now, the Orthodox community isn't quite ready to accept that because, of course, they're going to be originalists in this sense. It's a conservative strain that keeps people very, very dogmatic and religious. And I'm not condemning it. I think it's the source. It's the reason there are still Jews in the world is because the Orthodox like to have a lot of children, and some of them become more reformed as time goes by, or conservative, or what have you. So, I mean, I think there's a place for everybody, and we should, and going to love thy neighbor, just to touch on that, because that's actually something I speak about as well. It's in Genesis. I forget the exact verse. Do you remember it offhand? And it's interesting that it says, love thy neighbor as thyself, not love thy stranger. And I always use the example, there's not a single example of a penguin having an argument with or a fight with a tiger. And the reason is because they're not neighbors. The thing that neighbors share is a common thing that separates them, which is a strange thing to share. But if your sibling has a room next to yours, and your sibling is playing the stereo loud when you're growing up, and you're having an argument, it's because you share a wall, you share a sound space, and this idea of we want more, but we were tapped into this limitation. This world, the world that we are in, called Kabbalistically, and we'll discuss this more today, Olam Asiyah, is a world, the world of which means the world of action, the universe of action, time, space, and motion. The physical corporeal world in which we live is also the world of limitations. What do we call the upper world? We say the Olam Haba, the world to come, but it's actually not the world to come. That world is here right now. It's the world of Ein Sof, but it's not even called the world of Ein Sof. It's just called Ein Sof, without end. And the sages were very careful about choosing that terminology because it's literally they don't want to define the endless, because they want to say what it's without. It's without ending. It's without, and it's very difficult for us to conceive of this, even in a Euclidean reality that we live in a world where we're on a sphere. If you were to imagine an actual plane that goes on forever straight, the idea of a horizon actually doesn't play in, because that infinite plane would keep on rising higher and higher and go over our head. It's very difficult to imagine an actual, and speaking in a Euclidean sense, the idea of an actual plane that goes on forever. The idea of, because that horizon, there is some aspect, imagine there's no haze, there's nothing that would obstruct your view of this. Very difficult to imagine what that would it go over your head and beyond your shoulders. So this notion of endless is very difficult for us finite beings to truly conceive. And this is what the Sfirot, this is what the study of the Sfirot, the Talmud Eser Sfirot, the 10 luminous emanations in Hebrew, this is what this is trying to bridge. The bridge from the endless, tohu, what is also referred to as chaos, and tikkun, the world of order, the world of correction, the world that we live in. This earth of ours that has gravity, that consumes itself constantly. We eat the vegetables and the animals that eat the vegetables and the animals that will eventually eat us when we're gone and in the earth, and we grow as vegetation. We're part of this cycle, this masticating cycle that keeps on devouring itself. The oxygen becomes carbon dioxide and the water is recycled, and we live in this finite world. So the idea of love thy neighbor as thyself, it's saying, look, find your place here in what is it that we're doing. All of this will play into what we're discussing with regard to the 3 years fruit shall not be touched, because when you understand it from a Sfirot point of view, it's a different perspective. It's not the only perspective, but it will give you a sense. And so now we're going to get into very interesting, but very dry in the sense of the fact that it's intellectual. And I always try and warn friends learning Kabbalah, this isn't about intellect. You know, I had a teacher who once said, if after a 7-week course that I took, a Kabbalah 101 course actually, my teacher said, Moshe Rosenberg said, if I've taught you interesting things these 7 weeks, then I failed. If I've impacted your life and maybe you're going to look at life differently through a new lens, then we're on to something. And that's my hope as well, is that this is more than just an intellectual pursuit. It starts with the intellect, but we want to go one higher on that. So this Sfirot. Now, I don't know what you have in front of you. What I created for the class on Thursday were 2 specific handouts. There's one that looks like this. I don't know if you've seen this one, but there's also one that just has this. And I'd like to just start with this one. I don't know if you can see that there. It may be, if I won't hold this up the whole time, but if you don't have it handy to yourself, maybe you can take a snapshot of it, of the screen, just as a thought. And you might want to even write down the words at some point and then take some notes as we're doing this. If you don't like to write on Shabbat, I respect that fully. Normally I don't do this kind of thing on Shabbat, by the way. I usually like to follow the more orthodox. I actually prefer the screen-free day, as Jonathan Sachs referred to Shabbat. He liked the idea of he was a big advocate of people less religious or less orthodox having a screen-free day. But you'll see on the right, and by the way, I don't know what you're seeing. I'm seeing a mirror image. Are you seeing this in
We're
where?
seeing it, we're seeing it correctly, Robbie.
Okay,
We
that's
see
what
it
I thought.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you'll see on the right, you'll see Hesed, right? It should be
Mhm.
there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Gevurah. So this is
Yes.
number 1. This is number 2. Gevurah is number 2. Tiferet is number 3. Netzach is number 4. Hod is number 5. Yesod is number 6. And Malchut is number 7. Now, if we're talking about the frame of 10, which we're not right now, actually this would be 1. Ketzer, Chochmah, Binah would be, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But right now we're talking about the 7 sphirot, the lower sphirot, the lower triangle, I'll call it. So we, and the fact that I call it a lower triangle may be a bit misleading to, or seems like it's misleading at the moment. So pretend I didn't say that for the moment. I just, yes?
Oh,
Somebody,
I just chuckled. I just chuckled.
okay, all right.
Okay.
So I didn't mean to be misleading there. So now, with regard to Hesed, Hesed is the quality, or as the Tanya would refer to it, is an emotion. Which again, I'm not an advocate of that definition, but it's what the Tanya would have said of giving, of sharing, of imparting. And I don't mean this in a sexist way, because actually men and women are very much on a spectrum of like God or light to vessel, which we talked about on Thursday, light being the light force of God and the vessel being the receiving force. We're men and women are like this on the spectrum closer to Gevurah. That's why we are compared to the Shabbat bride on Friday night, receiving the Shekhinah, receiving the light force of God. We're like the bride. But the idea of the right column, the giving, the imparting, is what's referred to as male energy. And this goes to the biological function of the man being the imparter. It's also true in electricity, the idea of the male energy being the imparting energy, the positive flow. But again, I don't mean this to sound sexist. It's not meant to be sexist. I think it's centuries and centuries of sexism that has been in Judaism. So I'm not trying to offend anybody in this, but we need to have a common terminology and we should and a respect. The female side, Gevurah, is judgment. This is why women have a menstrual cycle once a month, which actually is a very positive thing and allows the female to purge certain type of negativity from their soul, or from the thing that men can't do. And so that's not, so just the idea, but it is the negative, it's the receiver, it's the vessel. There's a reason that a girl has a bat mitzvah and the house is a bayit. It's because this is a house. A bayit is a house. Bethlehem, house of bread, a bakery. That's where the word comes from, the shoresh, the source of the word is this idea of feminine energy. Hesed is giving, its partner, its vessel is Gevurah. In the Bible, one of the things that's also a feminism commentary in feminism within Judaism, I'm sure you're all very familiar, is what is all this focus on the patriarchs. And I'm going to discuss that because I think that's an important thing. Matriarchs are very important in the Torah, but it seems like it's almost apologistic in a sense, and it's not meant to be. The reason that they're male is because the thing that we come here to correct, and this is men and women, is the male aspect of our souls. This is men and women, because we both have male and female. We have the giving part of our souls, and we have the receiving part of our souls. The reason it's the male aspect that needs correction and not the female aspect is because for us vessels, for us receivers, all human beings, each of us, it has the receiving is the easy part. That's the part we get. It's the part we need to correct is the male part. So in the marriage union of Abraham and Sarah, from our perspective, because these are people who physically died millennia ago, many 3,000 years ago, more than 3,000, I'd take that back, closer to 4,000 years ago. These people, the Sarah part, we don't have to do that much correction on the vessel. What we need to correct is our capacity to share. That's the part that we need to work on. And so that basically explains why this is, and I realize that to some skeptical people, cynical people on this issue, I understand why you might say, yeah, that's, men always tell this story. The sins occurred with rabbis in the medieval period. It's very interesting to study certain midrashim from like the 7th century to the 1500s, even as late as that. And you see the sexism arises there. It doesn't arise. And this is actually something I did study in my master's. And it was fascinating to see where they would say, oh, see, it's the women's fault, and women brought on the evil eye and all of this stuff. That stuff is kind of suspect. But the basic notion we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use another medieval expression. We should understand it, we should look at it, and then we should move beyond it, because we need to understand there is an aspect of male and female and in our world, and this is whether or not we and very much a tikkun of our generation, because we're dealing now with transgender rights and humanist approaches to things. And it's no coincidence that we're born in the time that we're born, and that we have the attitudes of our generations that we have. And one of my students is actually he's a wonderful young man, and he's cisgender, but he is queer. And I told him, I said, look, I think actually there's a lot more room in Judaism for this question and where we are right now. So just so you know, this isn't, I don't mean to come across as sexist in any way, but it is something that you will encounter in studying the Zohar, are very will be a lot of sexual metaphor, because it is dealing with this idea of light and vessel, which is male and female in this regard. So Hesed, everything on the right column, everything on the right column here, Hesed, Netzach, that's what's called the right column. Also, you'll see Chokhmah over here. That's also, when we go up here, that's also right column. Everything on this side is left column. What makes Jews completely different than other nations, and why our tikkun is a particularly tricky tikkun, is because we also have what's called central column. And central column I described to you before as being the filament in a light bulb. It's the thing that says to the right column, I know you want to give, like a 16-year-old boy on his date with his girlfriend. He wants to do the male act. The female may very well want to receive. But the point is that to create a circuitry of light, a circuitry of energy, what we need is the filament in the middle. The world is replete with different types of dualities, yin and yang, good and evil, light and darkness. What Judaism offers is the central column. And if you look in the Torah, which we look at as Kabbalists more in an allegorical sense, is the idea that Abraham had his tent, had 4 doors that were open to the world, and people could come in, and they could learn, and he gave them food, and he taught them, and he went out to everyone, and he shared with the world. Whereas I'm going to put this down for a second. Whereas Isaac was left column. He received all of the wisdom of his father, and then what his job was to restrict that, because he didn't receiving too much was his tikkun. So what he needed to do is he needed to be bound. And remember, Isaac was not a small child. A lot of people who are critical of the Torah for being very judgmental. He was a 37-year-old man. He was pretty much in his prime. Whereas Abraham was 137 at the Akedah, at the sacrifice of. And it's interesting, though, if you'll notice, it's not called the sacrifice of Isaac. It's called, which is what the story is. It's called the Akedah. It's the test of Abraham, and in fact, it's the 10th test if you follow the Midrash. And if somebody comes to one of you or me, you should know, and says, "Okay, sacrifice your child who you love," you should probably check yourself into a mental ward, because this is dangerous talk. And if you listen to this person, Abraham is a different case. Abraham had been tested 9 times, really difficult tests where, he walked through fire. There was the thing with the idols. There was going down to Egypt. He had many different tests in his life that were really tough tests to pass. He saw his own brother die when his brother went through the fire after he did, though. And so I think the point here is, and is a great lesson in this. Abraham, you could equate Abraham, if you're not careful, to a suicide bomber. God is telling you to sacrifice a human life, and you say, well, isn't that a lot like a suicide bomber? And maybe it's your child, the child who was promised to you for your posterity, and that your children and your nation would be numerous as the stars in the heavens and the sands in the ocean and on the beach. How is it that God could do this? Well, let me tell you why it's not a suicide bomber. And it's for this exact reason. Because how do we go to the upper, how do we rise to the next world? You need somebody in the physical world, in Olam Asiyah, very important, to help elevate your soul, as a partner with your soul, to help you. And that's your child, and to carry on your lineage and to do something. If you don't have children, I don't have kids, you could give charity. You could help your community. It could be whether it's a Jewish community or it doesn't have to be a Jewish community, but something that you leave in this world is what allows you. That's where we're here, is to do actions. Once we're in the upper worlds, it's easy, and we don't actually get to be proactive. Only in this, what's known as the world of veils, are we allowed to actually make sacrifice, do things, and be proactive as opposed to reactive. If you knew that by helping somebody in this world, that you'd get a reward, well, you do it because it feels good. It feels good to help people. But one of the there's no proof that there's God in my experience. There's no proof, but there's a lot of evidence if you're willing to look for it. And one of the evidences is that pretty much everything that's good for you to do is difficult. It's easier to eat the chocolate cake or the steak or the fattening food than to eat the carrot salad with no salad dressing. Now, the health freaks out there will say, I like carrot salad more than I like chocolate cake. And I would say that person has done tikkun, whether it's in this lifetime or another lifetime. And so now they feel that that's doing good. Those of us, and it's probably everybody here, enjoys doing some charitable work and feels the thing. But we all know that there's a lot of people who aren't that elevated in that particular regard. And so helping people, to them, is anathema. They don't feel good by helping the little old lady across the street, as opposed to just going down to the beach. Now there's a condition. The old lady has to want to be helped across the street. You can't just find some random old lady and say, hey, let me help you across. No, and then she starts hitting you with an umbrella. There has to be a vessel to the light that you're sharing. That's a rule. if there is no vessel. So, and this goes to the Tzimtzum, this goes to the primordial existence before we even existed as in physical form, before the Big Bang. In the Tzimtzum, the light needed a vessel. It needed something to share with. The problem was that the vessel wanted to be that much more unified. We talked about this on Thursday. That much more unified with the light force of Hashem, of God. And so it said to, like, let me be a sharer. Let me be proactive instead of just reactive, because the vessel is always reactive. I want to take a little sidestep here. Because of David Levy's interest in Shakespeare. I'm a writer by trade. That's actually what I do, and I'm a and I also lecture a lot, quite a lot on protagonist and antagonist, and going with the what's the name of the writer, Bloom, and his examination of Shakespeare. Another Jewish boy, although I'm pretty sure he was an atheist. Forget his first name though. David Bloom. He was, I have it written down here somewhere. Anyways, he spoke a lot about the great contributions of William Shakespeare, and one of them was that's my observation, is before Romeo and Juliet, other than the Torah, which actually touches on this from a point of view of story. One of the, I think, the greatest contribution of William Shakespeare is the notion, from a literary point of view, dramaturgical point of view, is the idea of the invention of protagonist in a modern context. Prior to that, the understanding of what a protagonist was the idea of the hero or the main character, but which is true, and because the Greeks invented the term of protagonist. But what Shakespeare did in one of his early plays, Romeo and Juliet, at the very end of the play, which is exactly like the structure of a Roman play, but until the very end, and the Capulets family and the Montague family walk out on stage and they say, "What have we done? We've basically, because of our stupidity, because of our hatred and our jealousy of each other, we've killed off the scions of our family. We're a bunch of fools." And they walk off stage, and they become the definition of the modern protagonist, the character who arcs, the character who grows. We see this in Jacob as well in the Torah, because Jacob, we spend a lot of verses in Genesis, in Bereshit, with Jacob, where he goes from being more callous to less callous. We also see this evolution of characters generally in throughout Genesis as well, where Adam is not a very civilized individual, and then you go to Noah, who makes who does what God tells him, but no more. He doesn't pray for his fellow. But then you have Abraham, a few generations later, who prays for his fellow man and woman, and says, "Look, if in the city of Sodom, if there's 50 righteous people, will you save them, God?" He says, "Well, if you can find 50. So what if I can't find 50? What if I can only find 40? What if I can only find 30? Interestingly, where does Abraham stop praying for them? He says, "If I can only find 10. And this segues nicely back into our lesson. After he doesn't say, "What if I can find 9? What if I can find 8? Because he understood on a metaphysical level that the number 10 was very significant. So I just want to say good morning and Shabbat Shalom now to my sister Lori, who's I see has joined us. And so that going back again to the 10 Sfirot listed here. So Shabbat Shalom, and Shabbat Shalom to everybody as well who may have joined. So we're talking about, for those who are newly joined, we're talking about the bottom 7 of the 10 Sfirot, and we sometimes just refer to these two as the 7 Sfirot. So you have Hesed, right column, Gevurah, left column. It's the receiver of this. And then shortly after the Akedah, 2 things happen. Sarah dies, and there's beautiful midrashim on this, by the way, which I can't get into right here because time won't permit. But Jacob is born, and Jacob is Tiferet. He becomes the balancing of the two. And so what you see, though, is a bit of a confusion, because we know that Jacob has a twin brother in Esau. So this is central. So this is what they call the triangle of potential. Sorry, right column, left column, central column, Hesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet. Also, by the way, connected to the days of the week, Hesed is Sunday, the first day. Hayom Yom Echad. Today is day one. Or in the that's how the in the Sephardi prayer books they read it. In the Ashkenazi prayer books they say Hayom Yom Rishon, and there's a massive significance to that. But we will, again, I don't think we'll get into it quite so much today. But today is the first day. There's a massive difference between first and being one. One has within it this idea of deep unity. And actually, oneness is even greater than unity. Unity, well, depends on your perspective. Unity is where we, as separate consciousnesses, come together, whereas oneness implies that there's no separation even at the beginning. And if there's no time, space, or motion, then it implies unity implies process, if that makes sense, whereas oneness is a very special thing. So Sunday has a power to it. But not in the same way that the Christians make it their holy day. So you have Hesed is connected to Sunday. It's connected to Abraham, the patriarch. It's the idea of Hesed and sharing. And then you have Gevurah, Monday. Well, anybody who's been part of the workforce knows the judgment of Monday and how Monday looms. It's interesting. Monday is also the day in the Orthodox world that you have a Torah reading. On Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbat, which we'll get to. Again, notice they're all left column days, even though Malchut is the Shabbat. So you have Hesed is Sunday, Monday, and then on Tuesday is Tiferet. Wednesday is Netzach, right column. Thursday is Hod. Oh, and Netzach, the patriarch that's connected to this, and there's a reason. I'm going to talk about the patriarchs next. The reason that Netzach is connected to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, is because Netzach means, it can mean two things. It can mean immortality and it can mean victory. And it's a Bila Hamavet La Netzach, victory over death forever. It's a verse. And the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, if you read the Talmud, it says that even though the Torah says he died, says he never died. Moshe never died. And that's that he lives in all of us. His soul is a spark in all of us. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, and he's right column. Also, you'll notice something as well with right column energy versus left column energy. Right column energy is connected to the world of tohu, of tohu, the endless, of chaos, if you will, from our perspective, from our limited, finite perspective. The infinite has an aspect of chaos to it. Moses was not a ritualist. That was left to his brother Aaron. Aaron was Hod. And you might say, but wait a second, but Aaron was the Cohen. The Cohen reading is connected to Hesed, because the Cohen is that's why he's the priest, is because it's a connection to Hesed. But Aaron, the high priest, was connected to Hod because he also was a channel of the energy of God. When the sin of the golden calf occurred, Aaron was their channel, and he brought down the egel, the golden calf. And so he said, well, how could he allow this to happen? Well, because he was a channel. What do they say? You get the leaders you deserve. This is kind of one of those things. So Aaron is this. Then you have Yosef. Now, if you're doing this chronologically, you say, wait a second, didn't Joseph come before because he was the son of Jacob, who was Tiferet. So, but Yosef is connected as the patriarch, and I'm going to use a slightly different word, actually, chariot of Yesod. So if you look at the life of Joseph, Joseph's life was a very interesting one. We just, in the Orthodox readings, we just read the story of Vayigash 2 weeks ago. And Vayigash is when the brothers all come down to Egypt. They don't recognize Joseph. Joseph is now the person under Pharaoh who is disseminating. He's giving all of these the food out to the world because it's the 7 lean years with the dream, the lean cows, and he's giving out, and he's been made Pharaoh's number 2 person. He gives grains and all and store it and gives everything to the people of the world, including the Jews. He gives them, and they don't recognize him. And then when there's a whole drama that goes on between Joseph and Judah is connected as well to, but I'll explain that in a moment, to Malchut, which means kingdom, and is connected to Saturdays, connected to the Shabbat. It's also connected to the last 1,000 years of the 7,000-year cycle. If we're currently in the year 5784, right? That's since Rosh Hashanah, we've been in 5784. Malchut down here is that time. We're still in Yesod. We're in the tail end of the Friday of, millennial Friday, if that makes sense. So Joseph is the disseminator. He's the foundation. He's what's called the chariot of Yesod, the chariot of Yetzirah, which means the formation. And he's the one who disseminates, gives all of this to the world on a physical level. Why do we call these individuals chariots? Because, as you recall, I keep on referring to these to the idea of a vessel, light and vessel. Well, a vessel is like a cup. I can have a rainstorm outside, tohu, all this wonderful energy coming down, this water, but I have to have a vessel for that light force in order for it to be manifest. You can have all the blessings in the world, but if you don't have a vessel for it, vessels can be all kinds of things. Vessel can be learning. Beth, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. This vessel can only take in so much information at one time, and it's a good thing there isn't going to be a quiz at the end of this. I was wondering, Robbie, you're imparting so much information to us all at once. Could we pick a segment and focus on that? Because I personally can only take in so much, and if the others want to do it a different way, great. But
my suggestion, I said this on Thursday. I understand that your heads will swim a bit. It always does in these kinds of things in a good way. My feeling is because it's recorded, you can come back to these things. I do appreciate, and if you need a break from it, I'm not offended. You won't offend me in any way. But what I would suggest is don't be daunted by. I actually have a note on this. I actually said don't be frustrated here. I do realize I'm throwing a lot down, information wise here. I'm also available by email and what have you. It's just how many times am I going to be able to share all of this with you? But I do appreciate the fact that there's a lot going on here. I just feel unless everybody feels that I should stop, I do feel that because I want to give you this as a primer, and then this is just a primer for what we are for what I want to touch on the verse of the day that was chosen, the 3 years and the fruit that shall not be touched, that shouldn't be touched. And then I also want to talk a little bit about Exodus and just give you a little, and then that's really my spiel for the day. Is that okay, Beth?
Oh, it's fine. I just thought I would throw that out there because
No, I do realize
your
it's a lot.
knowledge is encyclopedic to begin with, and my mind doesn't work that way.
I'm telling you, you're not alone. Everybody who studies this, if they're studying it with some, their head swims a little bit, and it gets worse. It doesn't get easier; it gets worse. It's but it's like, and it's you sit there, and I remember once there was a there. I think I told this story the other day. There was this guy named Jack Rodriguez Cohen, and he was asleep through the whole thing. And then the teacher said, "Jack, what were we talking about?" And he was asleep. I'm telling you, he was out. You could hear him snoring, and it was a joke. Everybody was laughing because he had a really funny snore, and and then he explained what all of us seem to be in blurry land on. So, but and again, what I'm expecting to do is to download, let this go into the computer, let it sink in. If it's interesting, listen back to the video. And if you still have questions afterwards, I'm more than happy to, get an email or and even have a private call. Ricky,
Okay,
you want?
thank you.
No, thank you. Ricky.
I have a question. You brought up something, go back just a little bit. When you got you said Chesed was Sunday, the Vor Monday, Tiferet Tuesday, and the way you talked about Tuesday made me think that Tuesday is a good luck day, but I was always told that it was a good luck day because in the Torah, that's when God said it was very good twice.
Very good. Yeah. Wasn't
So I'm making now the connection with the Sefer.
You're 100% right. That is exactly right. That's one of the evidences that Tuesday is Tiferet, and it's the idea of creating that balance. And remember,
Exactly.
that's the top triangle, the triangle of potential. Now, I'm specifically mentioning this in the framework of think of the Jewish star, the Star of David.
Mhm.
Um,
Rosenzweig.
and Mr. G, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Robbie, very much. At least as I know it in the Orthodox, as I grew up with an Orthodox family, Tuesday was impressed upon me as being a day of getting things done that are important, surgeries,
Yeah.
very important business dealings, and that type of thing. So that kind of stuck in my mind. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. Friday
Wasn't
is
it also
also.
the day to get married? Weren't you supposed to get married on a Tuesday?
Yeah, I always want to be a little bit careful of superstitious stuff because
Okay.
I've known people who get very, and especially in this world, who get very tied up. Now, that said, I wouldn't personally get married in the month of Cheshvan or in
Right.
Tammuz or Av or even or Tevet like we're in right now. But I wouldn't rule my calendar. I know people who literally would not leave their homes most days of the year, and I think it's a real slippery slope. None of this. I'm not a superstitious person. Well, actually, I resist being a superstitious person. I refuse to mark my calendar with that kind of stuff because I think it becomes a trap personally. But I agree. But if I'm going to have a surgery, you know what? I can wait till a Tuesday, or I can wait. I can wait till it's a particularly more positive. If it's going to be Tisha B'Av, I'm not doing it on Tisha B'Av.
Right.
I don't fly on an airplane on Shabbat, even though Shabbat's very positive. Okay, let's have Donald and then is it Mike? Mr. G, is it Mike?
Michael is
Michael.
good.
Michael. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Let's do Donald, Michael, and then let's continue on. And then we'll have more time for questions. Donald?
Thank you, Robert. I was going to keep my mouth shut, but since we're at a fuel stop here, I'm
Sure.
going to jump in because I agree with Beth. You covered a lot of stuff, but I've been jotting down the ideas as quickly as I can as to what you're talking about, and I want to funnel that down to a quick question. So what I heard you talk about was number and boundaries, kind of Venn diagram type boundaries, polarity, unification and integration, hyperlink to Bible stories, discrete and infinite concepts, abstract versus concrete, and control of natural forces. And those are all very powerful ideas. But in the end, are you going to kind of get down to the basic idea of what is this going to lead us to do the next right thing?
Yes.
Okay, that's,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you're using interesting alternative words to the words that I was throwing out there. My the words in English that I tend to use on these things were actually not mine. They're words that were devised by modern Kabbalists and not so modern Kabbalists. Like when I talk about the endless, this is not my terminology. There's there's lots of commentary as to why the sages of modern and ancient used certain things. Like for example, I'll give you another example of the terminology and I know we all like to you adapt to our own terminology, but uh, the reason, and I do too, as a writer, I like to use my own words. Um, all of this I'm giving you, and as I said at the very beginning of this, I'm trying to give you a sense of Kabbalistic ways of looking at things, but I need to give you some lexicon. And so when they say, like for example, here's another example of the thing. I talk about the creator. That's a very deliberate word. The reason that the sages use the word creator is because, like a creator of a book, you can know in a very small line what the creator created. Our creator created this world, but we don't know what other things the creator created. We don't know what the creator's agenda is. We don't know that the creator has a family, wife and kids, or a husband and kids. We don't know anything about the creator except that he created us. So that terminology, that a word that seems almost random, it says, well, why not say the originator of the world? Well, that's true, but there's a reason that the sages use the word creator. So I would just say be open to the terminology that I'm using and because a lot of it, not everything, is very deliberate and was not created by me and by people much wiser and much more knowledgeable than I am. But that is a principle in that, and I hope that makes sense. And
yeah, yeah,
okay,
thanks.
so so yes, so the reason that we call them a chariot, and again, this is an ancient term, is because a chariot is like a heightened vessel. Each of these patriarchs, if you will, in the Bible was an example, an exemplary example of of this this idea of the idea. Abraham was an exemplification of Hesed. Isaac was the exemplification. He truly became Gevurah in a positive way. You know, people think of judgment, Gevurah, as a negative thing. And there are two judgments. There's lower world judgment, which just leave that and just understand lower world and higher world. We're talking about lower world judgment, but there is a type of judgment where you've been in a court case for 10 years and finally the judge comes and says, yes, Mr. or Mrs. So and so, you're owed $1 million. I judge that you get the $1 million. So judgment isn't necessarily a negative thing against you. We think of judgment.
Listen now. I just got in.
Is somebody speaking? There's a if we can
Lori, you have to mute yourself, Lori.
Hi, Lori. Yeah, Lori, if you could mute the thing. I think John was speaking there. Yeah, so the idea of judgment is not, I don't want you to think, oh wow, judgment, Monday is a horrible day. Maybe Monday's the day you get the project done or get approved. And again, this is meant to be, I don't want you to be superstitious about this stuff. Kabbalah is not meant to be a superstitious thing. There are a lot of superstitious people who follow the tenets of Kabbalah, but it really isn't meant that way. Now we get to where it begins to be less ethereal and more, I don't want to say interesting, but more applicable. We get into Malchut. Now, Malchut is the seventh of the Sfirot, of the lower frame of Sfirot. Malchut, what do you call it? The chariot of Malchut was King David. And the reason King David is called Malchut is actually multifaceted. King David, before he was king, had to run away from Saul and from the previous king, King Saul, and he had nothing of his own, because imagine the king of the country of the country is out to get you because you're a threat to you're an existential threat to his being. And so when he ran away with nothing but the shirt on his back, or maybe without the shirt on his back, he was praying. And he was praying with almost a desperation, with a craving, with a desire and a craving, because he had nothing. And that's when our prayers are the loudest, and that's when our prayers are most heard. The reason that I mentioned Vayigash from 2 weeks ago in the Orthodox cycle, the annual cycle of reading, which is the second to last parasha in let's see, second. If we can, in the second to last parasha in Genesis, the portion of Genesis, is because Judah, Yehudah, is crying, "Don't take our brother Benjamin." And the commentary says this was the loudest yell and scream, and he's saying this to Joseph. But we're taught as Jews, we don't pray to a person, we pray to God. And this is where things get interesting, because Yehuda was also not praying to Joseph, but he was praying to a level of God that was the sphira of Yesod, which Joseph, he understood on some level. He understood that Joseph was the level right above him. And as I mentioned before, this is foundation. This is the name this is the thing that Yesod has no personality of its own. If this is mercy, and this is judgment, and this is balance and beauty, and this is, and Hod is, Netzach is victory and immortality, and this is glory. Hod, by the way, the attribute is glory. Another reason it's connected to Aaron. And as I said, you might want to take notes on these things. And if you haven't taken notes, you can either review this recording, or I can talk you through it more and give you more information. Yesod is foundation. It's like the foundation of your house. It's the support, but it's also the conduit by which you receive. So let's look at the life of Joseph for a second. Joseph restricted himself when he saw Potiphar's wife, and he was very sexually attracted to Potiphar's wife and almost had relations with her, but stopped himself just in time. And for that, he's one of the two people in the Torah who's known as Hatzadik, Yosef Hatzadik, Joseph the righteous. For this righteousness, he was thrown in prison. And then, after years of being in prison under Pharaoh, he was able to successfully interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And he came out, and not only was he let out of prison, he was made second in command and was the disseminator of all the food and the grains, because he was the one who provided the solution to the problem. He was able to interpret 7 years of good years with the cows, and then 7 years of bad years because of the lean cows that ate up the good cows. And he was able to give this interpretation. And there's a lot to be said about that, and I won't go into so much detail. These are all clues. They're clues to the Kabbalist, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who explained this is why we know that Joseph was the chariot, because in life he was a chariot. He did this just as Moses was able to go beyond physical matter and split the Red Sea. Therefore, he was connected to Netzach, and Aaron was connected to glory because he was the conduit for the Sefer Torah. Interesting about the lower triangle, meaning, and when I talk about the lower triangle or the triangle of manifestation, Lori, can you turn your mute on? Because I think there's a conversation, Lori and John, on your thing, and I'm hearing sort of some buzz coming out from there. I think it's from you guys. I'm not sure. And one second, hold on. Oh, thank you, David. I'm not a doctor, unless you're talking about my sister Lori, who is a doctor. I have a master's, not a doctorate, but thank you very much. So now if you take a look at this, so we talked about the upper triangle, the triangle of potential, Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. Why is that potential? Those patriarchs that I just mentioned, that's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, respectively, those three, they had hundreds of people following them. But then you go down to Egypt. That the triangle specifically is Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Netzach, that's Moses. Hod is Aaron. They were the same generation. And then Yesod is Joseph. They were the leaders not of hundreds, but of hundreds of thousands. This is the triangle of potential, of manifestation. Now, let's talk about Mitzrayim for a second. Anything you see that we talk about is a negative thing. Actually, there's probably positivity wrapped up in it. Like I said, with judgment. Mitzrayim, what do we do during Passover, Pesach? We try and escape Egypt. But actually, there was a great thing. Egypt forged us as a nation. And we should never forget that in our adversity, we were forged. And Mitzrayim means constriction. Matzar, constriction, mem tzadi resh. The idea that we come out of this constriction and we are and that's the first time we're referred to as Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, the nation, not just, or by the way, the word Am either means nation or it means people. And roughly it's the same thing. It means, a people is a nation. It's also a family. That's the idea of being NAT. The idea that a nation is that would come from that same source. But it's also this idea of what did the Egyptians do? The Egyptians were the people who were very much of the physical, corporeal world. We were not enslaved in the way of building. We didn't build the pyramids. We know that archaeologically that we didn't build the pyramids. Pyramids were built millennia earlier, but we did help build cities, and we did do other things when we were in Egypt. The slavery that we were speaking of was not a slavery, as I mentioned on Thursday, was not a slavery to like African Americans were enslaved in the South in the United States. Different type of slavery. It was a slavery to the desire to receive for the self alone. Anybody who wants to write that down, that's a good one to remember. The slavery was a slavery to our selfish desires. And that's why in the Torah, and you don't need to know Kabbalah to see this, it's in the Pashat, it's in the literal translation, that the slavery was that we 2 days, 3 days out of Egypt, and we're murmuring against Moses and saying, "Why did you bring us out of this place? That was paradise. We're in the desert." And one of the first earliest Jewish bits of humor, the guy says in a sarcastic way, he says, "Weren't there enough graves in Egypt for us that we have to die out here?" I mean, you can hear the Yiddish inflections in the way this is written, and it's in Torah from 3,300 years ago. I mean, it's incredible. There's a lot of humor in the Bible, if you know where to look. And it very
excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What's the difference between chariot and vessel?
So a chariot is an exalted vessel. In other words, it's
meaning
all of us are vessels, but there are certain people who are exalted, so have been tested, have been it's like a vessel, a cup made out of tin versus a cup that's been purified. This is not good alchemy, by the way. That's out of silver, the purest silver, or maybe made out of diamonds. But it's more than that. We can use Joseph, the qualities of Joseph, And by the way, there's one time in the year where we do this methodically as Kabbalists. It's my favorite holiday. It's during Sukkot. What do we have during Sukkot in the Sukkah? We have Ushpizin. Have you all heard of the Ushpizin?
Mm.
Ushpizin are the guests. And
The
traditionally, at the end of the meal, a lot of people skip the Orthodox people, they skip this. And it's one of, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful things about Sukkot is the Ushpizin. Because it's not that you're and you stand at the door. Oftentimes, the way Kabbalists do this, oftentimes, I can't speak to all Kabbalists, but I've seen it done by Kabbalists, is they say, who here is named Abraham? Or who here is a Cohen? Or who here is and on the first day of Sukkot, they'll stand at the door because they radiate this energy. They're descendants, so they have the seed, they have this energy, and they welcome in the people. And we're encouraged to, I use the word imagine, but to manifest. And the first step of that is imagining what you see. Imagine Abraham walking through your sukkah door and coming in. It's not about having the person, and then followed by Isaac, Jacob. By the way, it's in this order of the Sefirot. So it's Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. And then on the second day, we bring in Isaac first, because he's the exalted of the exalted. Now, it's not about, yes, they sit at our table and we can imagine them. And I take the time and I actually imagine bringing them in, but it's not about the person. It's not even about the personality or as the Tanya says, the emotion. Because I think emotion's the wrong word. It's the quality of these people that makes us who we are. The fact that Abraham has generosity, that he was an example, an exalted, a chariot of this. What is a chariot? A chariot is a vessel. It brings you from one place to the other, but it's like the difference between a Rolls Royce and a Pinto, or a Rolls Royce and a Chevy. Chevy's a great car. A Chevy will get you around, but a Rolls Royce, you're doing it with some style, and I think that, and nothing against Chevys, but I hope that answers your question, Mary. Does that help?
More or less. Thank you.
I know
Keep going.
these are big concepts, but when on Sukkot, I'll give you an example, and I use this individually with one gentleman on Thursday. I think it was somebody here in this room, actually. I just can't remember because I spoke to a lot of people. The idea of Isaac as a chariot. One of the things that makes us different than our Muslim cousins, who are our cousins from the line of Ishmael, is that we have the quality of Yitzchak. Now, if you know the story of Yitzchak in the Torah, in the Peshat,
No, it's okay.
if you know the story of Yitzchak, you know that he was named because God came to through it was God or was it the angels? I can't remember now. To Abraham and said, "You're going to have all these children. You're going to have a son. I know you're 100 years old. You're going to have a son." And Sarah laughed. And the word
He
for
laughed first.
what's that?
Go ahead. That he is the first laugher. And they always talk about Sarah.
Well, no, but that's the thing. And what makes the Jews who come from the line of Isaac a little bit different, in one way, different than what gives us the quality. We're good. We have comedy. We can laugh at ourselves. We can also, I should point out, laughter is a very fun thing to do. If you've ever been to a great comedy or been to a great party and just everybody's laughing, laughter is a vessel, a metaphysical vessel for energy. It gives us energy.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons it's left column. We need laughter. We need to have desire to receive. Desire is not a bad thing. Never let anybody tell you, oh, you want to remove all desire from your life. Buddhists can do that. That's not our job. Desire, no, it isn't. We don't have this principle of lying on a bed of nails. That's not the Jewish people's role in this world. there was a great rabbi about 300 years ago, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and he wrote a letter. He was young, but he wrote a letter to his uncle, explaining the nature of this world, and how every generation since Adam is basically doing tikkun for Adam, and each generation is a part of the body of Adam, or Adam and Eve, and that as in Egypt it was the neck, hence the hint of the stiff-necked people, and you go down the body and down the body, and then finally the feet is the final generation. They're in the mud. They don't see the metaphysical world like our ancestors did, and yet it's the completion of the tikkun of Adam and Eve. So that is the idea that I want to impart on us. Just going back to the thing about Isaac and laughter. When on Sukkot, we should have the meditation with the Ushpizin, that we're bringing in this energy. Sukkot itself, and I don't want to dwell on Sukkot right now, a little pun there, because we dwell in the sukkah. But the idea is that we bring in what's called Or Pnimi, which is the external light, and we bring it into our internal light. Translating that into plain English, what Sukkot is so powerful, and we shake the lulav, and then we shake it in. It's the idea of shaking up the external light. Is that thing that's just outside of our grasp, that thing we want that's just outside of our grasp. And Sukkot is the moment where you can bring that external light internally. So one of the things we want to do is, and there's so many things that are going on in Sukkot. It's an amazing holiday, and so people are shuled out usually. They've been to Rosh Hashanah, they've been to Yom Kippur, they're taking care of all the hard stuff. Sukkot, you can show up in your blue jeans and just have a party. You don't even have to listen to the Torah. I mean, it's better to, but I mean, there's nothing you have to do. Just be under the schach, and it's a beautiful holiday. But I usually give 4 lectures on Sukkot, and during Sukkot, and it's I love doing that. Anyways, so moving back to where we were. So Malchut is connected to King David because it's the time of. There's a paradox here. In Malchut, we are empty. There's an emptiness. I told you about the great study of this that was created around, I think it was finished around the year 1953-54 by Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, who was the founder of the Modern Kabbalah Center of, it's worldwide, and where I learned, and he wrote this Sulam, and he was talking about, and one of his other books, and what I'm teaching you a lot from today, is a thing called Talmei Eses Sfirot, which means the 10 luminous emanations. And that literally refers to the 10 Sfirot. Luminous emanations. Sfirot are a tricky thing. It's the source is not sphere. I thought for a long time it must be, but apparently it is not. A sphere, but you could sort of say it's a sphere of consciousness. It is not an angel. I can tell you more what it's not. It's not an angel. It's not God. It is not the light force of God. Nor is it a vessel of God. What it is, it's kind of a conduit. It's kind of a lens through which you see the world. And it's very difficult to attach things. So a luminous emanation, it emanated, and it is luminous. It's filled with light. The thing is that the 10 luminous emanations is the wishful state. The truth is that only the first 9 are actually luminous. The 10th has no light of its own. The only way that it can create light, the 10th, remember, is very important to us. It's our world. Our world is Malchut, Olam Asiyah, the world of action. And Malchut means kingdom. I should differentiate, and I know I'm going into the weeds here, but again, this is for later review. Let it go into the computer and just accept that there's the Sfirot, and there are the worlds that the Sfirot exist in. So if I say Olam Asiyah, that means the world of action, but it's sort of the world of Malchut. Anyway, if you don't learn that today or even in review, don't worry about it. I probably should have not brought that up. But it's nothing bad about it. It's just it's complicated. So Malchut is Shabbat, is Malchut. This is the time when we can enjoy. We should to some degree, with some restriction, because we're still finite creatures, but we should feel the kingdom. So let me give you a metaphor now, which I hope will clarify this and not add to any confusion, but actually clarify. Think of a tree. A tree has a seed, and then the seed sprouts, has roots grow out from it, and then you have you have a trunk and branches that grow out, and then you have leaves that come out, and then finally all of that's these 7 sfirot is that process. It's not the seed. To be clear, this is it doesn't include the seed, and we'll get to the seed in a few minutes. But the fruit of that tree, the fruit is the malchut. You could even say it's the point of the tree. Now, we need to define why it's the point of the tree. So are you with me for the most part so far? Yep. Okay, good. So now we're going to talk about, and all of this is going to be tied together. I have a plan. This isn't just me rambling. I guess it is me rambling a bit, but this is, so now we're going to talk about the top 3 sfirot: Keter, Chochmah, and Binah. You can see it on my screen here. It's also on that handout that I gave you. You'll notice there's a dot circle in the middle thing. It's actually called da'at. And I'm not discussing that today, but that's why it's in gray and everything. But the top 3 sfirot are the sfirot of Keter, Chochmah, and Binah. Keter, and this is the reason that I didn't describe them first, is because now we're dealing with something that is in the upper realm. Everything below was a lower realm. We can understand it. It's the process. It's the days of the week, 7 days of the week. But wait a second, there's not 10 days of the week. How could you have Keter, Chochmah, and Binah? Now it doesn't make any sense anymore. Also, there's no people associated with these top sfirot. So let me explain Keter. Keter is the seed of the seed. That's how I would define it. The literal meaning for the word Keter is crown. So if you think of a person is like might as well be a gorilla. But if the crown is that seed, is the thought, is the and in human being, let's say you have an inspiration, let's say you're an architect and you want to build a building, you see this beautiful hill, and you say, I can see the entire vision of that building in my mind. And it's like this flash of lightning, and you see it. Well, before that happened, before the flash of lightning, and before you even recognize that flash of lightning, is that thought. We believe as Kabbalists that light comes before vessel. A man walks down on the sandy beach where the water is flowing, the sand is a bit wet, and he puts his hand and puts a print into the sand, and he lifts it up. Every point of convexity of his hand is articulated in exact reverse in the handprint in the sand. You with me on this metaphor? Mm-hmm. The vessel of that hand is the print in the sand. But there had to be a hand first. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The Kabbalist has no mystery. There's no mystery there. And also, if you think it through logically, there's the egg. There's the seed comes first, then the chicken. If the chicken is a mutation, that mutation existed in the egg, inside the egg. So the egg has to be first. Before that egg was a dinosaur egg or whatever came before the chicken. In the same sense, light comes before vessel. That's why right column comes before left column, because the light and then the vessel, the tohu and then the tikkun, infinity and then finitude. Now, Keter is the seed of the seed. It's before the physical thing. Chokhmah is the lightning bolt of energy. I'm using a metaphor here. It's the lightning bolt of inspiration. I want to build a building, says the architect. I see a girl and that's the girl I'm going to marry. And it all comes to me in an instant flash. And I see my children with that woman, and I see my grandchildren. And I see the future, next 100 years. If you've been so lucky to have that moment of just absolute clarity, that's Chokhmah, but it isn't. It isn't. That's Bina. Bina is the vessel. That's the understanding. So the key word for Keter is crown, which is kind of confusing, but it's the better way of thinking of it is seed of the seed. And let's talk about that for a second. Well, Chokhmah is wisdom. Think of a Talmid Chacham. Chacham means a wise student, right? A Talmid Chacham. Chacham is wisdom. The Zohar defines wisdom, having wisdom, is being able to see tomorrow, today. Somebody who can see tomorrow, today. Chokhmah is connected, and we didn't talk about body parts yet in the Sefirot, and I'll do that momentarily, but Chokhmah is the eyes, and Binah is the ears. Binah literally means understanding. So you can, and the reason that the ears are lower than the eyes, you can't see Lashon Hara, evil speech, but you can hear it. So that's why that's one of the reasons given. So these three are very quick. There's very little time, space, or motion in between them, and that's why I wanted to discuss them last. And that's the way I was taught. First we studied the 7 Sefirot, and then we studied, and we did it in 2 sessions. By the way, I was hoping to do this on Thursday, but we went into different topics. I went into different topics. So Keter is the idea, because the idea exists before you thought of it. Sorry to break it to you. We should lose our ego on that. The idea for the building always existed. It's God's idea. But then we got this lightning bolt, this lightning flash of inspiration. And then we received it, and Binah. Oh, what an idea I just got, we usually say. What an idea. So do you see how I've trifurcated this idea of an inspiration? There's the inspiration up in the heavens, there's the lightning bolt of it, which is Chokhmah, the wisdom, and then Binah is, oh my God, I can see this thing. Then we have the hard work of going down to the city commissioner and talking to our wife about it, and talking to our husband, and saying, I'm going to spend the next 10 years building this amazing building on this hill, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to get city planning, I'm going to meet architects, and then we're going to build, blah, blah, blah. And then opening day of the building, that's Malchut, that's the fruit. Now, the question is, how do you know? And this is where we get into morality and how to govern our lives. How does this ethereal, okay, great. So this is the process. This is how we take something. And remember, this is my promise to you today. The Sefirot explains something that otherwise is inexplainable, which is, and I've touched the surface of it today. So even if you studied everything on this 10 times, you would only be getting the surface of this. But how do you go from infinite to finite? They say Hashem is the God of the infinite world and the finite world, but it's oil and water. They don't really seem to mix. This is how they mix, is through the process that is the Sefirot. So and it's like a prism, and each one is a prism, but we get further away from the light, at least in our consciousness. When we're in Malchut, we think, we just see the building. We were always told, enjoy the journey, because the 10th Sefirot, the Malchut, the destination, it might not be as rewarding. There's no light in Malchut in and of itself. Remember, 9 of the top 9, I just finished a submission yesterday for a script of mine for a contest. It was very difficult. I was telling Lori and John about it. And took me 3 weeks to do this submission. I had to go through all kinds of processes. It's 37 pages. Now it's done. It's kind of like, well, okay, it's done. The joy of the work, even though it's hard work, the joy is, we should enjoy the journey, because the journey is really where most of this is. And once you have the house that you desperately wanted, it's not enough. You need the next thing. And therein lies the key with Malchut. How do we know that the fruit, the apple of the tree, how do we know that the apple is actually the point of the tree? Why not the leaves? Why not the bark? Why not the roots? You can eat, you can eat the roots, so you can say, well, but is it about me and what I can eat and I want to open that up to the floor. And then I want to have and then I want to continue this just a little bit more and then discuss the thing for another 10 minutes. I know we have to finish at 12 on the dot. So I want to leave time for questions. And I'm doing that.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Just excuse me. If Malchut is the last point that we want to reach, why would you call it Olam Asiyah, which Asiyah is still doing? It's not
because
the end of it.
That's a great question, and it's very deep. First of all, Olam Asiyah is where we live in the world of Malchut. The world of Malchut is Olam Asiyah. They're different, but they're the same. That's the reason I touched on it, but I don't. It's like, for example, there's other worlds. There are 5 worlds to be specific. It's a lot. I think, but it's a great question, and I don't want you to be distracted from. I think the question is great. Review this a little bit and maybe read a little bit. And if you want to ask me again in a couple of weeks, I'm more than happy to have the discussion. But it is confusing. I get it. And by the way, I still sometimes am confused by it. So I claim no superiority on this. But the question I want to ask you now, and I want to leave it to this question for this moment. In 5 minutes time, I'll open the floor up to any further questions or 10 minutes time, excuse me. And then, so that should give us a good 15 minutes and I'll be able to finish what I need to finish. And okay. So my question to the floor here, how do we know that the apple is Malchut?
Wouldn't it be because the apple is the purpose of the tree?
How do we know that that's the purpose? Maybe the purpose is the leaves.
Well, except that the apple has the seed to go to the next generation of
Bingo. You got it. Excellent. So this is the thing. You know that a Malchut is a true Malchut if the seeds for the next generation are within it. And I want to talk to you for a moment about the miracle of seeds. Think of the redwood trees. I'm from California, and I spent my birthday in the redwoods. It was amazing.
Yes.
3,000-year-old trees. 3,000-year-old, some of them. 2,000 years, 3,000. In that seed, in that little seed that it started, and it's little, it's not very big, of a redwood tree, is all the potential leaf. It is known. We don't know it because we haven't gotten there yet. But in 50 years' time, 10 years' time, maybe, we will know that tree would have the potential to live, let's say, 4,522 years. And each year it would be able to sprout so many branches and so many things. Now, in potential, none of us, nothing ever lives up to its potential in the finite world. That's for the upper worlds. So that's for the infinite worlds. But we can get close to it. We can get close to that thing. And in the seed, not only is the seed, and this is true of human beings, not only in the seed is the potential of how many leaves and how many pieces of fruit will come from those leaves or from the branches, how many, and all the potential. Now, it could have bad seasons. It could have a drought season. It could be a fire one year. There could be somebody chops down the tree and takes out the roots. But in potential, The potential is known inside that seed. And that seed, that little seed has this it taps into the infinite. And the way that it taps into the infinite is not only does it know how many leaves it will have, it also knows how many, it also has the potential for more seeds. To this day, to this moment in our technology, we have yet to invent a machine that can replicate itself. We have Xerox machines. We have Xerox 3D printers, but we can't make a 3D printer that can make another 3D printer, and certainly can't do it out of its own consciousness. We might get there, but we haven't gotten there yet. So there's a lot of respect to have for the seed. The seed taps into something. And remember, it's all of our seeds, human beings, plants, animals, all come from a bigger seed, and even all things physical, even minerals. So the way you know that something is a true malchut, and not some sort of a thing. If I put honey in my ear, that's there's a very loaded word. You could call that evil. Why evil? It's a very loaded word. I don't mean it to be loaded, but it makes my point, because that isn't the proper malchut, proper vessel, going back to the word vessel, for the light that can be revealed from the honey, unless my purpose was to make my ears sticky. Maybe, I don't know, could be some sort of a thing. But the taste that's revealed is only revealed on the tongue. Another little point, not so little, very interesting. And I'm going to leave this off. This is the different parts of the brain, but this is from the sages. This is from the Ramak, Moshe Cordovero, the teacher of the Arizal, until the Arizal became his teacher. Hesed is the right arm. I actually made a mistake about the brain part. This is the brain. This is the eye. Chokhmah is the eyes. Keter is the brain. Chokhmah is the eyes. Bina is the ears. The right hand is Hesed. So giving, charity, you're supposed to give with your right hand. That's the reason why. Sharing is the right hand. Left hand is is receiving. When you go to a tzaddik's grave, like if you go to the Rebbe, you're supposed to put your left hand on the grave, because you're not giving them anything. You're receiving through them from God. I mean, we don't pray to these people. Then you have the body. The torso is Tiferet. Netzach is the right leg. Hod is the left leg. Yesod is the spine and the reproductive organ. And just like Joseph was tested, and by the way, I could give examples for the other Sefirot as well in the tests. He was tested through sex. Potiphar's wife, he was attracted to her, but because he restricted, that's why he's central column. That's why he was Yesod, and that's why he was later called Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous, Joseph the righteous. And David is the feet. So these are connected. There are Kabbalistic prayers that we use where we meditate on Hesed and do our right arm and left arm, and this is all humanity, and it's Tikkun Olam. So that's there. But the reason I say this is because if you want to know, and this is the morality aspect of this, if you want to know if building that building on that hill is a positive thing, ask yourself, how is doing that dream going to be something that you can share with others? We are each, the tikkun that we are trying to correct, remember I said, is the male side of things. That's why males are more mentioned in the Torah, is not out of a sexist point of view. It should never be from the point of view of sexism. It should be from an understanding that the male correction is the idea of changing our way, our channeling, because the male is not God. The male is a channel. And the female aspect is the manifestation of that. That's why a woman puts a woman's touch on the house. I know this sounds very old-fashioned, and a male can, that's why the men tend to do the prayers on things and the women. Now, it's been corrupted by centuries and centuries of sexism, and I recognize that. But I do think that this is something that it's a shame because there is something to the identity, the male and female identity in that. Now, how does this apply to the 3 years fruit shall not be touched? Well, again, there's certain things, and this actually is very close to Sukkot. Again, if you look at the top 3 sfirot, this is in the upper worlds. It's not something that we are supposed to touch. You know, when you have, during the holiday of Sukkot, you're not supposed to touch the schach, that's the roof. And the reason is because it's in the framework of Binah. And everything else, the fruits and all the lulav, the etrog, the lulav is yesod, the etrog is malchut, and the 4 species, the myrtle is hesed. Anyways, it goes on. I could go through the whole. It's actually, the myrtle is hesed gevurah tiferet, because that's why it has the 3 prongs. And then the what's the other one? Help me, somebody. The myrtle, the 3-pronged one, and then the willows are netzach and hod, and then the lulav itself is yesod. So and the etrog is malchut. And that's why, if you know the rules to like how the etrog has to not have the pitum, it can't be damaged because it's the malchut of the malchut. You need to have a proper malchut. Anyway, there's a whole Kabbalistic understanding to this, and it's not made up. I mean, this is probably the source of this, and everything is built on top of this. So when we talk about 3 years, fruit shall not be touched, it's speaking about those 3 years being this close to the seed, close to this high energy. And I like to think of, we talk about, I always love when you talk to an atheist, you can always catch them up because you say, you don't believe in God. Which God don't you believe in? And you say, well, do you not believe in the God of, what is God, first of all? Oh, and they have trouble defining it. Sometimes. Now, sometimes people have no problem defining God that they don't believe in. So I don't want to lump everybody into one category. But because that would be unfair and incorrect. But the idea of the God that we go to is, so this is the metaphor I like to use. If we get all of our sustenance, and we actually don't, because there's also other places we get our sustenance from physically, the sun. If we get our sustenance from the sun is like the god of Keter. We don't really access the sun. The sun is way too hot and blinding, but we actually get the light of the sun, the energy of the sun, and then we utilize that energy of the sun. And then there's a third aspect of God that we use all the time, especially in the religious world. They say, if you go up to somebody, how are you doing? And they say, Baruch Hashem. You've heard that expression, haven't you?
Mhm.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
Hashem is the name. And we've just entered into the book of Shemot, by the way, which is Exodus in the Orthodox cycle. And the interesting thing about Shem, that a name is something we give to a vessel. It is the vessel of the light on a metaphysical level. That's why when you think of people who are named Moshe, or people who are named Tiffany, or named Robert, or there's something about that carries that soul with them. One of the most important things to do is to properly name a child. That's the thing. Michael, I will ask, I'll open the thing up to questions in 2 minutes, I promise. I'm almost done with my spiel, and then I'll open it up to comments and questions and what have you. So I do appreciate that time is nearing.
The essence.
And so and then there's also tomorrow as well. So what I was going to say is that this idea of being close to the essence of what this is, the seed level. The seed is something it's beyond we can't access the sun. In the same sense, we can't access that highest level of the sun. The tetragrammaton is not the highest level of the name of God. The highest level of the name of God that I'm aware of is Aleph K Yud K. There's a higher level even than that, I'm sure, but Aleph K Yud K is connected to the world of Binah. And we connect to the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of formation. The world immediately above Asiyah is Yetzirah, or just the one that's immediately above us, the one that Joseph was connected to. And that's where Yud K Vav K, the tetragrammaton, which I don't even dare pronounce all the letters together because that is like the light of the sun. That's where we access our thing. It's from the foundation of our existence. And I apologize because deserves about 2 years of study, and I'm throwing it together in an hour and a half. And so that gives you a sense of that. And I would point out that there are 5 of these. The last thing I want to say is that there are 5 of these worlds: Adam Kadmon, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut. Let me start again. Adam Kadmon, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Those are the 5 worlds, and they correspond with different levels of the Sefirot. Some of them are groupings of Sefirot. I'm not going to go into all of that detail right now. And the idea is those 5 worlds correspond with the different books of the Sefer Torah, and they're very clear. It's very, very clear. It's not guesswork or hocus, but you can see when you understand the worlds more, and it would require another class, though I don't think we're going to have the time for in this session, to understand even just the basics of the groupings of these worlds. But I've given you a foundation that you could, if you review this material, and I did another one of these classes, let's say in 6 months' time or something, I could probably explain it out. So the first book is that seed of the seed, right? The Keter. And that's Genesis. And we can see it. It's all about planting seed. This family will become this nation. And this guy becomes this family, becomes this nation. And this nation will have this quality. Then Shemot happens, and that's the next world. That's the world of that we talked about, Chokhmah, the lightning bolt of energy. Well, this is when the Torah is given. This is when we cross the Red Sea. You can see that whole power. Then you have Leviticus, where today's source is coming. This is the energy store, the world of Bria. And I meant to mention this to you about Binah. Yeah, can you come back later, please? In an hour. An hour and a half, yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I'm in a hotel. And Bria, and what's special about Leviticus and special about Binah, and I didn't say this is the energy store. Imagine like a kid in a candy shop. This is when you are inside a sukkah where you have the schach, and that's Binah, this energy store. This is where you can get this. And I also wanted to point out one last thing, and then I'm going to open the floor up. Think of think of I mentioned to you 7 days of the week. We had these 10. We have 10 sefirot. The top 10 of the 10 sefirot, the top 3. Where does this fall in the days of the week? Well, I'll tell you something. These 3, just like the seed is inside the fruit, Malchut is the fruit. These exist inside the Shabbat. Binah is Friday night. How do you know? It's the energy store. Anybody who's been to a religious Friday night, there's a warmth, there's a thing, family, there's an energy that just sort of, the food is great and it tastes wonderful. That's Binah. That's it. If you want a taste of Binah, of that world, and anything is possible kind of thing, that's when you feel that inspiration. Remember, that's when you acknowledge, that's the vessel for the inspiration. That's Friday night. The Torah reading on the morning of Saturday morning, right now, Shachri, morning services, that's Chokhmah. That's the lightning bolt of energy that's coming to us. We don't even necessarily feel it, but that's when it happens. That's why the Torah, I'm so pleased to hear that your community has commissioned a Sefer Torah. Having that in your community, you are giving a gift to the entire, to yourselves, to your families, to the community. It's such a bracha. It's hard to emphasize it. And then if you've done third meal, and mincha of Shabbat and on a Saturday afternoon, it's kind of, you don't really feel much, but it's actually the most powerful time of Shabbat because it's the seed of the seed when you can create new realities. This is where we Kabbalists get a lot of fun. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I want to open the floor up for any questions and comments and reserved criticisms.
Before I recognize anyone,
Yeah, let Martin, I hand it to you.
if we have to end this, I'm going to take the liberty at 5 minutes after 12. Then please make your think about what you want to say and make it very brief so Robbie can have time to answer the question. So that's all I'm going to say. Okay.
Can I tell you that the
Look,
Zoom
wait, no.
the
Let me
Zoom will
get this
stay
in.
on. I'm just letting you know the Zoom will stay on until there's 45 minutes of no activity. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
just want to let you know that we could be here for 2 more
And I
hours.
can stay on. I can stay on for a little bit longer. I mean, I have no problem staying beyond
Yeah.
12.
Okay.
But I know that
It's
I know that
because
some of you
Robbie
have
has
to move.
another appointment to get to, and that's why we have to take that into consideration. Go ahead, Michael.
And even though
Okay,
even though I study Kabbalah, I'm not going to be. The appointment is not an exorcism. Just.
I have, thank you, Rob. I have 2 questions. Just let me ask the 2 questions as quickly as I can. Does music play a part in Kabbalah in any way? The second question is, you mentioned the energy of the sun. Does the moon provide any energy, especially a full moon?
Great questions.
Yes.
The answer to music is absolutely. Music is the highest form of teaching. I have one student who's very intuitive. I don't know where he gets his desire to study Kabbalah. He's a bit of a mystery to me. And in one point, he sort of blew me away. He said, I want you to teach me how to play guitar. I thought that was because he knows I'm a musician, and like you are, Michael. I thought, he said, I know you want to teach Kabbalah, and that's what we're here to do, but can you teach me? Yes, I will. And because it is actually the highest form. I'm going to share a very quick Hasidic story with you about the Baal Shem Tov. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. I'm here tomorrow, so and I'm available beyond being in the area too. So the Baal Shem Tov's walking with his students and through some little shtetl, and he sees this non-Jewish farmer, and he hears him whistling a song or singing a song, beautiful song, and he goes over and the students are following. They've just collected charity for the poor people of the Jewish community, and they're there, and we're talking the 16 or 1700s, whatever it was, and he says to the farmer, I want to hear that song again. Will you sing it for me? And the students are looking at the guy like, this is the Baal Shem Tov. He's a busy man. He's got things he has to do. Why is he asking for this song? And then he says something even more astounding. He says, I will pay you for this if you sing it for me again. So farmer says, sure. Why? Why not? And the students are stunned. This is money supposed to help poor people. So the farmer, he sings the song. He says, that was beautiful. Would you sing it for me again? I'll pay you more. Gives him more money. He says, okay, fine. The students are just jaws drop, but they're not going to say anything. And this goes on 20 times. And then he says, please, will you sing it one more time? I'll give you some more money. It's the last of the money. And then the farmer does something even more extraordinary. He says, I would, but I can't remember it. And I said, well, thank you very much for your time and for singing your song. Have a wonderful day. And he walks in. So, the very religious, very respectful of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov sits with them on Shabbat, Friday night, Saturday morning. Then, Sudash Shlishit, the third meal, when this world is open to all possibilities. I just mentioned this. And they sit and they can ask their Rav, their teacher, the question, what the hell was going on? You took all this money and you paid some non-Jewish farmer to sing you some songs. He says, and the Baal Shem Tov was a very lofty spirit. He said, I recognize this as one of when the temple was destroyed. This is one of the songs that belonged to the Levites, the Leviim, who were the priests, the priestly sect of the 12 tribes. And I recognized it, and it had been lost into the world, into the universe. And this farmer had obviously picked it up, and I was buying it back. So does music have a place in Kabbalah? Yes. And it has an incredible curative power. I have a very good friend who's a Lubavitch teacher, and they are very, very much into this and teaching. They do nothing. There's this one organization within Lubavitch, Chabad, that only teaches nigunim of Lubavitch to the world. They wanted me to be involved with it. It's not my connection personally. I'm all into music, but Lubavitch music is not my thing. But there are people who I heard testimony, people who they said, I heard this song and it changed my life and I became religious or whatever. So that's their bag. That's great. Your second question was great one. And remind me what the second one was?
I'll just say this one thing based on what you said. When I play, I feel very spiritual. It's a very spiritual feeling for me when I play. The second question is, does the moon have the same type of energy?
Yes. Yeah, great. So what we didn't discuss is the planetary relationship with each of the sphirot. And the moon is Malchut. And how do we know it's Malchut? Because it has, remember I said Malchut has no light of its own.
Right.
Malchut, but the lesson that the moon gives us is that the moon reflects light.
It's a reflection.
And that's how we should behave. You'll notice I'm wearing a white shirt and I'm wearing a white kippah. I'm supposed to wear, I'm actually not, but according to the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Lurie lived about 500 years ago, you're supposed to wear 4 articles of white clothing on Shabbat because Shabbat is Malchut. And the way we are to treat Malchut is our job as Jews is to transform Malchut from the sake of receiving gravity, for the sake to turn that, to receive for the sake of sharing. And the moon is the perfect representative of this because why? Because it reflects the light of the sun. And from our point of view, one of the great aspects of there's a great mystery about the moon is that the moon, from our point of view, and this is all astrology, by the way, is our point of view of the heavens, the moon is exactly the same size as the sun, which is from a diameter point of view. If I think, and I'm a little bit self-conscious here because I know that we have an actual astronomer here, and so I may have the facts wrong on this, Davi. Please feel free to correct me. But I believe it's 1/400th of the diameter of the sun. The moon is. Why is that significant? Because the letter that controls, and we didn't discuss the origin of the letters and how they came 2,000 years before creation, which is discussed in the Sefer Yetzirah attributed to Abraham the patriarch. The letter Taf controls is if you will, and I'm using it metaphorically, but sort of really is sort of the DNA of the consciousness of the moon. The letter Taf. What is the gematria of Taf? The numerical value of Taf? 400. Coincidence? Pretty big coincidence. Of course, coincidence, everything has to have a numerical value. And you could, if it was 200, I could come up with something, but 400, it is pretty cool. There. So yes, the moon is, and the sun is, this won't make any sense to anybody who hasn't studied this before, is what's called Ze'er Anpin, which means the small face. Just very quickly, the 6 sphirot, Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, is what's called the small face, Ze'er Anpin. And then, of course, Malchut is Malchut. So Ze'er Anpin is the sun, gives us the light, where the immediate place that we get the light from, and Malchut is the receiver, is the vessel of that, the 10th luminous emanation, because it reflects the light of the sun. And that's what we should all be. We should receive. We should eat a beautiful meal today, but then use the energy that we get from that meal to spread more light, to build more of the community, to leave. And that's why the desire that each of us has to leave some sort of a legacy in this world is significant. And it's important because yes, it's desire. Yes, there's ego. Okay, lose the ego. When you get the moments of ego, that's the moment that you say, that's an ego moment. Okay, how can I transform my desire to receive for myself alone, ego, into desire to receive, because we're humans. We need to receive for the sake of sharing. How do we reflect light? Why is the four items of clothing? Because they're connected to the 4 phases of existence. Anyways, I think that's enough of an answer, but I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Before I call on the other two, you summarized Hineni. I am here. Here
Okay.
I am. Okay, and it's a concept of reflecting it back to God. Yes. Anyway, okay, I don't know who had their hands up first. I'm going to let you two
I want to
ladies
reflect on
decide.
something Michael said, one of Michael's questions. So I will be brief.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's called Nigun, when you're just chanting and you're just
Yes.
Yes.
is that play a part in Kabbalah, or is that just because that's another sort of way to touch onto the spirituality of Judaism?
I'm not sure I follow the question. Explain the question again.
Well, Michael brought up what part does music play
Right.
in Kabbalah, and I'm wondering if that's the root of the Nigun, when you just you sort of just, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I can describe it.
Channeling.
Dancing.
Mhm.
Just singing nonsense, nothingness tune, but that does connect you to
I
something.
think you're right, Ricky. I think you're right. I think that the fact that we are musical creatures by nature, human beings are musical. Music of the spheres. I mean, this is what the 16th century astronomers believed, that the planets made music as they traveled through the heavens. And I agree. I think actually they've shown that they do make sounds. I don't know how. I mean, this I think is for Mr. Levy, Dr. Levy, to explain better than me. But because I don't know how sound travels through space, where there's no air. But
wasn't sound the beginning of language? I mean, we had song or tonal before we actually had letters and words.
Well, if a tree falls in a forest, is there any, the question is it sound, or is it our ability to hear? The mystical element of, and I can only speak on Binah, the mystical element of Binah is the idea of understanding. And understanding is something that happens when you get a group like this, and we discuss and we talk and we use that in a proper way. I always would say, though, remember the words of, and this isn't my idea, this was actually brought down by that Lubavitch rabbi who I learned from, Rabbi Fivish Vogel, who quotes, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt. I think that's who he attributed it to anyways, but I haven't researched it. Says there are 3 levels of conversation. The highest level is when people talk about ideas. The second highest level is when people talk about events. And then the lowest one, of course, is when we talk about people. So it's good to keep things lofty, keep ideas, and remember, it's with great power, with the ability to speak and do music is a responsibility. So
Okay, Beth, you had your hand up before, then Michael.
Michael, did you want to say something else about this music thread?
I did, but you can go first.
Well, no, let's finish with the music thread first.
Okay. All I've been with music all of my life. And so I noticed that the value of music has a big influence on human beings, like nothing else that I could see. It helps memory. And I learned this mostly very recently when I was performing for people who had Alzheimer's and dementia. It stirred their memory, brought things back like nothing that I know that could do that. No books, know nothing, but hearing the music. And this started for me when I realized it started when I was just a little boy starting to play. It was building up in my life until the present day.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and I would only just offer that if you think of it from a mystical point of view, from a Kabbalistic point of view, it's because it taps into a higher realm. Like you were saying before, Michael, it taps into that higher realm, the energy store. And Laurie's and my father was one of the great songwriters of the 20th century. And he was Robert B. Sherman, named after him, and he was and one of the things that they had I always say it's the voice, it's the vision, and it's the platform. The voice is the ability to create the poetry or the music. The vision is having the idea. You can have a great voice, but what are you writing about? Think about all the pop stars who just write "Ooh baby baby" or something like that. What is that about? But it's a small world after all. When you go into that ride, and then of course the platform was Walt Disney, because Walt Disney gave a platform to the Sherman Brothers to actually exercise their voice and their vision. And so they were very fortunate that they were able to give that. But all musicians, including yourself, when somebody walks into hear your music being played, Michael, and you uplift their spirits, or you listen to a Beatles album, or you listen to a thing like that. The reason I bring up my father and uncle, and Laurie's father and uncle, who wrote "It's a Small World," is when you go to the Disneyland ride, it's a half-hour experience. You walk up to the ride, you see the big towers and all that. If you go to the one in Anaheim, and then you get into the boat ride after about 5 minutes, you hear the music, and then you're inundated with this wonderful Shabbat message of that we share this world, so let's take care of it. And at the end of the thing, if you're not changed by that subliminal message, the words are important, and the music that they rest on, that each of these words rest on, you're going, you people are changed by it. I'm sure that has stopped fights, that song.
There's one other point to that. It's also the rhythm. You've got the lyrics, the melody, and the rhythm of the music. And that old music has that rhythm. That's very critical for me.
Okay, excuse me, Michael.
I agree.
Excellent points. Excellent points. I want to give Beth a chance to ask her question, and then we must end this.
Yeah, I apologize.
It'll take for Robbie to get to his next appointment. It'll take up some time just driving there. Okay.
Okay, question. Well, first of all, I wanted to go back to the apple and the seed.
Yeah.
I believe that, and I think it's a Jewish thing, I believe we are all born with that seed of great potential, that God gives us cornucopia of gifts. Certainly he did me. And that my purpose in life is to develop those gifts and share them. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. Just, it seems selfish not to develop what God gives us. So my question to you, and it's great because the whole rather be born with original possibility than original sin.
Yeah.
But this is a standing on one foot question, Robbie. With all of the study and all of the depth of your learning with Kabbalah, how does it translate into your actions in life?
On personal. Okay, so standing on one foot, and of course this is related to the great.
No, it's not fair, but
Rabbi Hillel, and I'm no Rabbi Hillel, but there's some great stories I like to tell about Kabbalistic explanations of Hanukkah and what have you with Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai. In my life personally, I can tell you I probably was an atheist until I certainly had no connection to Judaism. Some people find the tradition, the community and all of that stuff, and all of those are pluses to me now, but I was bar mitzvahed in a traditional reform manner and all, but I it didn't really mean it or resonate to me. And nothing. If I had just gone to Chabad, for example, and listened to the Tanya, I'm just speaking about me personally. I don't know. I just don't think this resonated with me. I don't expect, by the way, that everybody that this is going to resonate with. I think you've been a very positive crowd. I have people sometimes get very upset with me and telling me that So I'm kind of ready for anything whenever I give a Kabbalah lesson. And sometimes people will smile through the whole thing, and then they'll say, you're talking crazy talk, buddy. Okay, that's fine. It doesn't. Everybody has a different tikkun. And I mentioned Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, one of my favorite Kabbalists, and he talked about a guy who was definitely not liked by the academic world. If you look at books from 100 years ago, they talk about the crazy Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and it's so funny because I didn't realize that. I bought some Jewish grits. If you know I think he was a German guy. He's a historian. I bought some like 100-year-old Encyclopedia Judaica kind of books and volumes of them, and I looked up Luzzatto. But Luzzatto, he believed that each of us is doing the tikkun, a spark of the soul of Adam. So each of us is going to connect to a different thing. A lawyer might be in the realm of judgment. Again, a lawyer can be a very helpful person, and it doesn't mean they're negative just because they're on the left column. Maybe they're helping a person get out of a horrible divorce, or a child get out of a bad parental situation, or there's a million ways that lawyers can be very, very positive. And there's certainly the realm of free choice. For me personally, and it's something that's worth meditation on. Which one of the sfirot do you? We're all sfirot, because we don't just, let's say you have some great thinker like Jonathan Sachs. Maybe he's the Ketzer. Maybe he's, because he gives a brain to things. I mean, I tend to think that I'm more in the Hesed realm, just based on things in my life that tend to go. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not somebody who likes ritual, because ritual is very much the realm of tikkun. Ritual. We were doing Shabbat, and I, especially after giving these lectures, I sit there. If you were to call me up to the Torah, for example, let's say you had regular Torah services, which I hope you eventually do get to as a community, and you called me up, you'd think I'd never been in a synagogue before. It's like, okay, you're gonna open up the ark, and say, do I do that before this or after? I can never remember that stuff. And it's terrible. I mean, it's almost laughable how bad I am at that stuff. But
Says the man who can remember to wear white on Shabbat.
but that to me isn't ritual. That's a logical thing, and it's dealing with outside things. And then there are people who are phenomenal ritualists, and they can't, but the ethereal stuff. And believe me, when I have more time, or if I'm keeping a very limited subject matter, I'm trying to give you a whole introduction, and I apologize.
I want Robbie on one foot to tell me how Robbie is affected by Kabbalah.
It gives me a perspective that I resonate to, a perspective of Judaism that I resonate to.
Well,
Beautiful.
with
Thank you.
that, I am going to end today's session because I know people may have other questions in mind, and just as was said earlier, and I know some people had to leave and came back, they may not have heard everything. So I'm going to it was mentioned, if you have any further questions, jot them down and come tomorrow to the temple. You can ask it then, or you can review the entire session that we've had here, or you can ask the question, submit it to the rabbi. The rabbi will get it to Robbie, and you'll get the answer to your question. So there are multiple ways. So I want to thank everyone. And
let me cut in. The recording probably will not be available till tomorrow or the next day.
okay.
So it's not an instant. It's going to be posted up on YouTube. or
Okay.
on our channel, right?
So with that, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom
Can I ask one
and
question?
have a very healthy week. You take care.
Thank you very much.
Whoever said,
Shabbat
oh, that's a
shalom.
great question.
Thank you, Robbie.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you,
yeah.
Robbie.
If you do you want to ask me a question, I can stay on for a couple minutes because I don't have to leave for about about 5 to 10 minutes.
Would like to, do we have access, two questions. Do we have access to your email? Number one.
Sure.
Number two, I'd like you to, I think it's a matter of semantics, but I'm seeing much more similarity between the Jewish, the Kabbalistic attitude toward desire with more similarity with the Buddhists than you do. And
I'm
much
not an
more,
I'm not an expert
Yeah,
in Buddhism,
yeah.
so maybe that's true.
yeah, it is.
I mean
Is Gail
Judaism
still here?
generally.
Gail's not here.
I think because Judaism is not a proselytizing religion, there are things that resonate actually much more freely to other non-proselytizing religions. The problem with proselytizing religions, as I see it, and look, all religions are subject. I think all religions come from a place of divinity. I think that humans are very easily corrupted and corruptible, and so that does, and Judaism isn't excused from that list. I think that, I mean, I'm a Jew, so I tend to be an advocate for our people, but with regard to Christianity and Islam, for example, because they are proselytizing religions, and to have the idea of a dualist mindset there, and they're not, and I don't mean to lump all Christians and all, because there
I
are
know.
wonderful Christians and wonderful
Yeah.
Muslims, men, and wonderful sects in each of them as well. Sect, SECT, just so I don't get.
If I can ask you,
So just to finish the thought, the beauty of the problem, I think, though, is that it's very easy for individuals to say us and them, to say, that there are that there is this, that Satan is indeed a rival to God. Not just Jews believe that Satan, or at least the way I was taught, is that Satan is, or Satan is like an obstacle course. It helps us to refine ourselves. But there's no realm in Judaism where Satan could beat God in in fact, that may be the reason why we aren't out there saying we have to kill a different sect of Jews who we don't agree with. Even if we disagree vehemently with them, we don't tend to kill them. I mean, yeah, there's the exceptions, but they really are exceptions, not the rule. Whereas you do hear in certainly historically with Christians, not so much today, but with Islam, it does sadly go on today. And it has to do with this dualistic approach to the universe and the creator, that there is indeed a rival to God. But Judaism is a wonderfully monotheistic religion in what I believe is the true nature of monotheism, which is that God is one. Not that there's one God, but that God is one. And so therefore, even though he may be our neighbor and we may have a problem with him, ultimately he is part of us. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi.
Robbie, not Robbie.
Rabbi Robbie.
I'm not
What
around.
what time will you be? I have two questions. What time will you be at the temple tomorrow? And how long will you be at 3:00?
Yeah, I'll be there a little bit early, but I do like to sort of get in the mindset of what I need to talk about. So but I'll be happy to talk afterwards.
And how long will you be in town?
I leave tomorrow morning. No, not tomorrow morning. Monday morning. Excuse me.
Monday morning. Okay. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have to be back in London shortly after that. So yeah, but
Okay.
I'm reachable, and I've given my email address on here. If anybody wants to reach me, I'm around, and we can do a Zoom. I mean, that's I'm around. The only difference is I'm about 7 hours later than you guys, and I will be hitting the ground running when I with my stuff when I get back to London. I literally I would love
The
to
re-
stay another week. I just can't. That's